Please don't kick me. I'm already hurt, she cried. Then her billionaire husband appeared. Rain poured mercilessly over the nearly empty parking lot, the sound of thunder echoing in the distance as a young woman knelt beside her broken-down car. Her thin jacket clung to her soaked body, her trembling hands desperately twisting a useless phone that had long run out of charge. Her eyes darted between passing headlights, silently praying that someone, anyone, would stop to help. But instead of kindness, judgment found her first. From a nearby cafe, a small group of people watched with sneers and whispers, sipping coffee as if her suffering was entertainment. One of them smirked, nudging the other. She looks homeless. What's she even doing in a place like this? The laughter that followed pierced through the rain, cruel and sharp. She tried to speak, her voice weak and shaking. Please, I just came from the hospital. I had an accident. I just need to call for help. But they didn't listen. Her words fell flat against the wall of their arrogance. A woman in expensive heels stepped closer, wrinkling her nose as if disgusted by the sight of her. Honey, this isn't a shelter, she said mockingly. You can't just sit here looking like that. You're scaring away the customers. The young woman tried to stand, clutching her side in pain, the injury from her accident still raw beneath her coat. Her bag slipped from her shoulder and landed in a puddle, soaking her few belongings. As she bent to pick it up, one of the men from the cafe laughed and kicked it farther away, splashing water onto her face. Get out of here before the manager calls security, he barked, his tone dripping with superiority. The woman froze, her lower lip trembling as tears mixed with the rain streaming down her cheeks. She wasn't angry, just broken, too tired to fight. Her voice cracked as she whispered the only words she could manage. Please, don't kick me. I'm already hurt. For a fleeting second, silence blanketed the parking lot. Even the rain seemed to hesitate, as if the heavens themselves mourned her pain. But then the group turned away, pretending not to hear her plea. They went back to their warm cafe, to their laughter, to their comfort, leaving her kneeling alone in the cold. She stared at her reflection in the puddle beside her, her face bruised and pale, her eyes filled with silent despair. Everything hurt, her body, her heart, her faith in humanity. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering, as a single car drove past without stopping. For a moment, she thought that maybe the world had forgotten people like her. But as she sat there, drenched and defeated, a distant roar of an engine echoed closer. Headlights broke through the storm, cutting across the dark parking lot and stopping just a few feet away from her. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to change forever. The sound of tires splashing through puddles echoed across the parking lot as a sleek black car came to a stop just a few feet away from the shivering woman. The group that had tormented her turned toward the sound, their laughter fading into uneasy silence. The car door opened slowly, and a tall man stepped out, dressed sharply, his presence commanding and his eyes burning with quiet authority. He held an umbrella, shielding himself from the downpour, but the moment he saw her kneeling on the ground, drenched and trembling, his expression changed completely. Without hesitation, he dropped the umbrella and ran toward her, kneeling down beside her as rain poured over them both. He took off his expensive coat and wrapped it around her shoulders, his movements gentle yet filled with urgency. She looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief, recognizing the familiar warmth of the man she loved. He cupped her face, wiping away the rain and tears as he whispered, "Who did this to you?" His tone was low but carried a cold intensity that made the bystanders step back in fear. No one answered. The same people who had mocked her minutes ago now stood frozen, unable to look him in the eye. Their arrogance melted into panic as realization began to dawn. One of them stammered nervously, "We didn't know she was with you, sir. We were just trying to—" But before he could finish, the man's piercing gaze silenced him completely. Straightening his posture, the man turned his attention to the group, his voice deep and controlled but laced with unmistakable fury. "With me?" he repeated slowly, his tone cutting through the rain like a blade. "She's not just with me. She's my wife." The words struck the air like thunder. Gasps escaped from the crowd as shame painted their faces. The woman who had laughed earlier clutched her purse tightly, her face turning pale. The man who had kicked the bag stepped back, eyes wide with fear, his earlier confidence evaporating into regret. The billionaire's presence was magnetic, yet terrifying. His calm anger spoke louder than any shouting could. He turned his attention back to his wife, helping her to her feet with utmost care, his arm protectively circling her waist. She leaned against him weakly, her voice barely audible as she whispered, "I didn't mean to cause trouble." He looked at her tenderly, brushing a wet strand of hair from her face. "You could never cause trouble," he murmured softly. "The only mistake was theirs." His eyes flicked once more toward the group, his glare so sharp that no one dared to move. "If any of you ever treat another human being like this again," he said coldly, "you'll answer to me." Then, without another word, he led her toward the car, shielding her from the rain as he helped her inside. The engine roared to life, the taillights glowing red through the mist as they disappeared into the night, leaving behind only silence, guilt, and the echo of his words that would haunt them forever. The man opened the car door and gently helped her inside, shielding her from the rain with his arm. His face was calm, but his silence carried the weight of a storm. Before getting in himself, he turned toward the group of onlookers who had humiliated her just moments before. His voice was sharp, controlled, and chillingly cold as he said, "I own this entire block, and starting tomorrow none of you will work here." For a moment, no one moved. Then panic rippled through them like lightning. The cafe manager stumbled forward, his voice trembling. "Sir, please, we didn't know. It was just a misunderstanding." Another chimed in. "She didn't say who she was. Please have mercy." But the man's expression didn't change. His eyes, dark and unreadable, lingered on each of them. He didn't need to shout. His authority alone silenced every excuse. Without another word, he turned his back to them and slid into the driver's seat beside his wife. As the car began to roll forward, the only sound left behind was the rain pounding against the pavement and the faint sobs of regretful employees realizing their fate. Inside the car, the world felt still. The soft hum of the engine filled the silence between them. She sat with her head lowered, her hands shaking as she held his coat tightly around her shoulders. He glanced at her, his voice softer now, full of concern. "Why didn't you tell me you were coming here alone?" he asked gently. She hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've been so busy lately," she said, tears forming again. "I didn't want to disturb you with something so small." He sighed, his eyes softening as he reached over and took her hand. "You could never disturb me," he said quietly. "You're not something small. You're everything I live for." Her tears fell freely now, a mixture of relief and pain. She turned toward him, her heart aching at the tenderness in his words. He brushed a raindrop, or maybe a tear, from her cheek and smiled faintly. "No one will ever hurt you again," he promised. Outside, city lights blurred past the window, reflections of a world that judged her without knowing her worth. She leaned her head against his shoulder, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat as it calmed her trembling body. In that quiet moment, she felt safe again, but deep down, she couldn't shake the sadness of what had happened. For a fleeting instant, she had been invisible, reduced to the way she looked, treated like she didn't belong. Now, held in the arms of the man who saw her for who she truly was, she finally let herself cry, not out of weakness, but out of the deep truth that love, when pure and unwavering, could heal the deepest wounds the world tried to leave behind.
The morning sun broke through the storm clouds, painting the city in a deceptive calm, but chaos brewed just outside the cafe that had once humiliated her. Reporters crowded the entrance, cameras flashing like lightning as microphones thrust toward the trembling employees. Headlines blared across every screen and newspaper. Billionaire's wife humiliated by CAF staff husband, shuts down entire franchise. The people who had laughed at her now hid their faces behind aprons and menus, trying to escape the judgment of the world. Their arrogance from the night before had vanished, replaced by fear and shame. One reporter shouted questions. "Did you know who she was? Do you regret what you did?" The manager stammered, unable to form a single answer. The cafe doors remained locked, a closed indefinitely sign hanging where yesterday's laughter once echoed. The rain had washed away the dirt on the pavement, but it couldn't wash away what they had done. Meanwhile, in a quiet mansion, far from the noise, she sat by the large glass window, overlooking a peaceful garden. The air smelled faintly of roses and rain. She held a cup of tea, her hands still trembling slightly from the memory of that awful night. Her mind replayed the scene, the cruel laughter, the kick, the way her voice cracked when she whispered for mercy. Even now, it hurt to remember, but then she felt a familiar warmth behind her. Her husband walked up silently, wrapping his arms around her shoulders and resting his chin on her head. "Don't think about them anymore," he whispered softly. "They don't deserve your pain." She closed her eyes, leaning into his embrace, feeling the safety that only he could give. "It's not about them," she murmured. "It's about how easily people forget kindness." He turned her gently to face him, his eyes full of love and determination. "Then we'll remind them," he said firmly. "You have the heart to change people. Let's make sure your pain means something." That same week, he announced a massive charity initiative in her name, a women's shelter that would provide safety, food, and hope to those who had been abandoned or mistreated. The story spread across the nation, not as a tale of revenge, but as one of redemption and grace. Cameras soon captured her standing beside her husband at the grand opening, her gentle smile returning as she cut the ribbon. When asked by a reporter why she chose forgiveness over anger, she simply replied, "Because someone once showed me love when I was at my lowest. Now I want to do the same for others." From that day on, the world remembered her not as the woman who was mocked in the rain, but as the woman whose compassion inspired thousands. The cafe became a symbol of shame, but her name became one of strength and hope. And as she walked through her garden each morning with her husband by her side, the pain she once carried slowly faded, replaced by the quiet power of forgiveness.